the pure feelings of his pure devotees. There was once, Haridas was in the village of Chandapur at Balaramacharya's house. Was a very devoted Brahmana, and he was the guru of Govardhan and two brothers who were, Govardhan was the father of Raghunath Das Goswami. So Raghunath Das got his association with Haridas and heard so much glories about Haridas. So they were living, he was living very happily there, and then they had a meeting one time with a discussion with all some good scholars and Brahmins that were there, and they were describing Haridas was describing the glories of the holy name. And now simply by chanting, that even just by chanting without offense, one can obtain perfection of freedom, liberation from the material world. This discussion, what was going on, they were quoting scriptures. So that one was saying that you can get free from all your sinful activities by chanting the holy names, and another was actually you can get even liberation by chanting the holy name. Then Haridas Thakur said, well, actually there's something much better than both of them. They're insignificant. But the real fruit of chanting the Hare Krishna is that one that develops affection and love for Krishna. That's the real fruit of chanting. This liberation is insignificant. There's one Brahma there, very aristocratic Brahman, very beautiful. His name? Gopal Chakravarti. And he became very offended and offensive. And he said, what is this? What is this you're saying? You know, liberation is is praised so much in the scripture. Not easy. Sages, giving their lives to become liberation. And this person says it's simply by offenseless chanting of the holy name of Krishna one time you can become liberated. What is this nonsense? I see now the scriptures. In the scriptures it says in Kali Yuga, the Milechas, they will speak from the Vedas. Now I have actually seen with my own eyes what is going on. And they became, and then Govardhan and his brother, and they immediately chastised that Chakrabarti like anything. What are you saying, you foolish person? You're insulting Haridas Thakur, he's a great saint. Everything will be spoiled immediately. Because he said to Haridas, if you say that you can get liberation simply by chanting in Namabhash, offenseless, if that's not true, I'll cut off your nose. Haridas simply smiled at the person's ignorance and said, yes, if it's not true, I'll cut off my nose, don't worry. And then he began to explain from the revealed scriptures how the chanting of the holy name, even in Namabhas, will give one liberation. So he said liberation and free from sins is a byproduct of chanting Hare Krishna. It's insignificant. And And he actually proved it by different scripture. Because the fact, when you chant Hare Krishna, it has no material meaning. Even though we may not be chanting it purely, still Krishna and Krishna's name are not different. They're completely spiritual. They're coming from the spiritual world. Goloka, Premadana, Harinam, Sankirtan. This holy name, it is Krishna. It's identical with Krishna. There's nothing material about it. So when you chant Krishna, it's Krishna. But according to our adhika, we can perceive Krishna to the degree of our devotion and purity. Because we may not experience Krishna, because we don't have any experience of the name and the object being the same in the material world. But actually it's a fact. When you chant Krishna's name, hear about Krishna, pastimes of Krishna, then that is the platform of liberation. Because there's no material reaction for that. So we're absorbed now in hearing the pastimes of the Lord and His devotees. This is the platform of liberation. We won't get the material reaction if we're not thinking of anything outside of Krishna consciousness. So if there's no material reaction, there's no karma. So if it's not karma, what is it? There's only material world is moving under karma. That's all. It's a living entities, conditioned living entities desire, material desires that perpetuate the universe. Otherwise, there's no need for a material universe. But because of the desires of the living entity to manipulate the material world and enjoy the material world, then Krishna creates it again and again and puts us here to try to fulfill our illicit desire. But the fact is, Prabhupada said that's when you're chanting Hare Krishna, absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then that's imperceptible liberation. You don't feel liberated, but it actually is liberated. You are liberated. And the perception will come at the time of when we become self-realized. But the fact is, it's actually liberation, because it's not karma, you see. And the result, the liberation is actually insignificant in comparison with devotion, although it's glorified in the scripture and praised like anything. The liberation, it means liberation in the sense of becoming free from the modes of nature, which is the goal of the Gyanis, yogis also, and others, transcendentalists. You may, if you're fortunate, become free from the modes of material nature. That's the platform of peace, shanti. But it's not actual. But when you're liberated, now what will you do? When you're coming out of the material energy into that position of sat, it's fantastic. There's no more troubles. It's complete peace. But now what are you going to do there? We're living entities, we're personalities, so there'll be desires. So what will we desire there? So it's not actually happiness. It's just relief of material suffering, which is it's not really fantastic. Relief of suffering is not fantastic in itself. It's just a normal condition of the living entity, tatastha, shakti. The actual tatastha means that we can become under the influence of the material or the external energy. That's our tattva. In between, the actual tatastha situation, that's the liberation. When you're in between, you're not under one or the other. That's actually mukti, or nirvana, what the Buddhists call nirvana. But unfortunately, you can't stay there. Fortunately, you can't stay there. You can't actually hold that position. You can't stay in between. You can't stay in that position of nirvana, because we are, not for long anyway, relatively speaking, maybe long, but not for long, because we're persons. We're created for a purpose. That purpose is Krishna's pleasure. So then after a while, that experiencing sat is not satisfying. Nothing there, nothing to experience. It's just existence. There is no experience. There's no variety. There's no happiness. There's no distress. How will you know it's happy? There's no distress. So you're not going to experience that ananda. So in that sense, it actually becomes insignificant. Although it gets you out of the material world, it doesn't get you into the spiritual world. That is grace. And that grace is obtained by bhakti, pure devotion. So we at the stage of perfection, then one realizes one's actually is dependent on the mercy of the Lord. The endeavor of the living entity and the mercy of the Lord, these are the two things. So we can endeavor so much. You can endeavor as far as you can endeavor according to your ability, but you realize it's not enough. So that's why it says you can't get prema, Krishna prema. You practice sadhana for thousands of lifetimes, you'll not get prema. It's a fact. It'll get you out of the material world. You get your peace. You get your liberation. But love of God is awarded by Krishna himself. But that, if you're really, really serious about your sadhana, I mean really sincere, and you give everything into it, you'll reach a point where you can't give any more. You're doing everything. You're following everything perfectly. At that point, you say, Krishna, I'm doing everything. Where are you? And Krishna's not speaking. And he's not showing himself. So what can you do now? You've gone as far as you can go. You've given everything, all your ability. At that point, you realize, I'm dependent on Krishna's grace. You're out of the material world. To the spiritual world, you have to knock on the door. Someone has to open the door. So it'll take you to there, but someone has to open the door. So at that point, you realize it's not by my endeavor. But your endeavor in sadhana has brought you to the realization that it's not my endeavor, it's by the mercy of the Lord. Because at that time you'd have realization, it is by His mercy. I've done everything possible within my ability, and it's not enough. Now I realize I'm dependent on Krishna. So at that time you can only cry, pray. And of course Krishna will reveal himself to you at that time. And then that's the point, then you can, at that point you can actually surrender sincerely to Krishna. As long as a false ego, you can't surrender sincerely to Krishna. Because that false ego, we still have some attachments, the idea that we can have some happiness and some comfort in the material world. We won't let go of the idea. That false ego is the last thing that goes, because it's the first covering. So that's what you've got to surrender. So when you surrender that, you realize, I'm insignificant. I thought I was had some ability, even spiritually. Materially I gave up, but spiritually I tried. But now I realize, even spiritually, the program is mercy. I'm just awaiting on your mercy, Lord. Then you'll feel actually insignificant. Then you're really humble. Then you can cry sincerely. Sincere, the genuine cry, baby for mother. You chant Hare Krishna. Then you can chant Hare Krishna sincerely. Because you'll be sincere at that time. So that's what the sadhana will take you to, that platform of surrender. And then surrender is the beginning of devotion. So these are the realizations that Haridas, he was showing. He's a living example. It crossed that stage. He was actually surrendered to Krishna in love. Now he's experiencing Krishna's presence. He's experiencing the love of Krishna directly. So therefore Mahaprabhu said, your birth and activities are better than mine. He's our Acharya. We worship him today and pray for his mercy, for his humility, for his tolerance, and for his blessings, that we can also one day obtain the grace of Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Srimati Radharani. Jai Srila Haridas Thakur ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol.